Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome to Inside Arsenal Extra Time, an international break version of our Inside Arsenal Extra Time. Hopefully, we can cheer you up through this interlull. And if we don't, then you can just laugh at what James Benge is wearing. What is that?
I thought I was bringing some 70s glam rock flair to the pod today. For those of you listening, I am wearing, there's nothing to describe it other than a leopard print cardigan. I like it. I think I would fit very well into early Roxy music. It's quite cold today in my house, so I just need to warm up. And what could be warmer than wrapping yourself in leopard?
It is very
not an
you.
actual leopard. Not an actual leopard.
That's
As much as I would like that.
That is very you. I don't think I could pull that off, mate.
You got to try.
Not really me. It's very
swing
you,
for the fashion fences.
It's very you. So, how was the weekend? All good?
It was lovely. Yeah, I know we're going to come to talk about this, and I'm going to talk quite a lot about Bayer Leverkusen and their players, and obviously some of them are former Arsenal players. But yes, I was out in Germany, had a wonderful time, spoke to Xabi Alonso and Granit Xhaka and some other folks, and saw a pretty excellent game of football. But then I guess you probably saw quite a good one as well on Saturday. Not thrilling, but quite good.
It was all right. Yeah, it wasn't exactly a thriller minute. It's kind of in keeping with the season, really, but it was professional, controlled, dominant. Obviously, you had the little nervy moments when they sort of grabbed an equaliser out of nowhere. But I think the fact that Saliba scored a couple of minutes after that ensured that it didn't get too nervy, if you see what I mean. It's immediately sort of things, the way the game had been going was restored, and then Arsenal cruised in. And it was good 3 points, definitely. It was good 3 points, especially coming on the back of what had happened at Molineux just ahead of kickoff, which was very funny, and sort of set the day up pretty well. And you kind of thought, you got to take advantage of that, and they did. That was really, really funny. I have to say, I was in the pub in Finsbury Park. I was meeting some mates before the game, and we watched it. I don't know if you've been to the fullback before. It's sort of Finsbury Park way, and it's good. I don't know. It's probably about a 20-minute trek to the stadium, and we were kind of planning on leaving, sort of 2:30-ish to make sure we got there, or 2:20-ish to make sure we got there in time. And then we got so caught up in what was going on at Molineux, and just as you thought, they're going to ride this out, Spurs, and get the win, and suddenly the equaliser came, and it was like, we can't go yet. We've got to watch this. And then the winner came, and and there was a mad dash to the stadium, and I literally got into my seat just as they were kicking off. So it was a real late one, but it was well worth sticking around for because it was very funny.
That Sarabia equaliser was sensational.
What
I
a
mean,
goal.
like, I'm not a big one for the long ranges. I think that is the sort of goal I absolutely love, and it's quite sort of, it's a bit Arsenal-y, isn't it? Quite technical, but like volleyed first touch and then volleyed second. What a player.
That's a Santi Cazorla type goal. Santi would pull something like that out of his bag of tricks. It was such a good goal, especially as honestly they couldn't hit a barn door for the entire 90 minutes. Typically Wolves, and then you go and pull out a goal like that to equalise. It was absolutely fabulous. Fair play, and they deserved it as well. They were very, very good. It just looked like being another one of those games where they couldn't score though, and fair play, they did. And Arsenal took advantage. It was a good weekend actually for Arsenal and for Liverpool as well. Did you get to catch anything of the game at the Bridge on Sunday?
I literally got back out. I sort of went into the mix zone and interviews and stuff, and it was 1-0 City, Haaland penalty, and you go like, yeah, okay, right, this sort of game. And then the next time I checked my phone, I was like, what on earth has just happened? And that was 4-3, and then Cole Palmer, brilliant. I mean, I think it definitely puts Arsenal's performance at the Bridge in a different light, doesn't it? But also, I mean, brilliant. Some brilliant players on that Chelsea team, especially Cole Palmer.
Yeah, fair play to him. He's had a really good start there, and he looks the business. It was a brilliant game, honestly. That's right up there. It's one of those games that will go down in. You'll watch it on Sky Sports in those sort of 15-minute Premier League classics type shows that they do. It's right up there with the very best. I didn't think City were great, but the fact that they weren't great and they were still a few seconds away from winning 4-3 against a Chelsea side who played very, very well kind of sums up City. They obviously normally know how to get over the line, but. It was a definite penalty. Did you see what Ruben Diaz did when they showed the replay of that and the mad dive he does to no, it was for Nicholas Jackson's goal. Sorry, it wasn't the penalty where someone shot from like 25 yards and the keeper spilled it and Jackson scored. But then on the follow up, but when you watch the replay, Diaz kind of throws himself to block the shot after the shot had gone, and the fact he was about 5 meters to the right of it. And if he'd just stayed on his feet, the ball would have bounced back straight to him and he clears it. It was really, honestly, it was one of those bizarre things when you didn't sort of notice it in real time. But when you watch the replay, it was really, really bizarre for a player as good as Ruben Diaz. It kind of summed up just the craziness of the game.
Does this then mean, off the back of last week's conversation, we can strike him off the list of defenders better?
Yes,
than
he officially turned into Shotgun Mustafi for about it was a proper Mustafi moment. It really was. It was something he would have done. It was a mad moment, but what a game! And yeah, fantastic. We will actually. I've got. I do want to right at the end of the show. I wanted to sort of get your thoughts on where we are in the Premier League at the quarter. We are quarter of a way through the Premier League season. Can you believe that?
I mean, it feels longer. Both feels longer and shorter, doesn't it? It's that November international break is always sort of like, you look down at the table and you're like, okay, this could be where we're at now. 11, 12 games in. It's there's generally nothing very false about these teams. One or two exceptions. I'm looking at Chelsea as one of them. I think they are a much better team than the table says.
All right, well, let's stop because we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this at the end. And I wanted to get on to. I mean, we've been billing it. We spoke about it. Me and you have spoken about it, and I've been asking the viewers to send in their comments. At large part of today's show, we were going to talk about the one player in January, and we are getting there. We're about 6 weeks away, so I think we're allowed to talk about January now, aren't we? Just about.
And we need content. We need people to engage with what we're doing. Yeah,
it's classic international break content. It is 100%, and it's been really interesting actually, because I've been trying to come up with who I would actually sign, and obviously we're trying to be realistic here in a way. Ideally, give me Mbappe. Obviously, that's not. I'm trying to be realistic with it, of course, and I've been changing my mind a lot, not just about the player, but about the position and what I would do. And I've kind of come up with my pick, but I'm still not 100% certain on it. But yeah, so this is the player that we think Arsenal could sign in January that, realistically would give them even more of an edge in the second half of the season and potentially push them on for the title and that sort of thing. So I'm going to hand the floor over to you, first of all, to give me what's clearly going to be the wrong choice.
Oh yeah,
I will 100% hand it over to you to reveal who you would sign if you were in charge of Arsenal's finances in January.
And even as I texted you this, spoiler alert, on Sunday at the Bayer Leverkusen game, I was like, "Are you really going to go with this one?" And then I forgot to change my mind on it. But it is a signing I quite like, and I know he's a player that Arsenal have admired for a long time. And there is sort of, what's the right way of putting this? Over the summer, from what I heard, there were at the very least conversations about this player, and that's Jeremy Frimpong of Bayer Leverkusen, who I'm going to be talking a lot about over the next week or so. And I know what your immediate response to this was, what many of our viewers' immediate response to this will be. He's a right back, isn't he? And Arsenal have, at the moment, I would argue, although Tomiyasu played there, they have one right back, and I think probably two left backs, we would say. Tomiyasu's playing more there with Zinchenko. But what I like about Frimpong is he could be that right back, and it's always nice to have some depth and versatility in defence. But really, I'm looking at Jeremy Frimpong as the guy who provides a burst of pace and a burst of directness off the bench when Bukayo Saka needs to sit, or you could even, and I know this happens very rarely, if Bukayo Saka goes on the left flank, or you could even maybe, I know he doesn't play very often, play Frimpong on the left flank. You'd need to get him in the building to work that out. But really a direct runner, searing pace, which outside of the first 11, Arsenal are a little bit light on. And my big thing about January is I don't think it's a good time to buy your foundational pieces. I don't think Arsenal should be looking to buy the striker of the next 4 or 5 years that will compete with and maybe succeed Gabriel Jesus. I just don't think you're going to get that player in January. But if you could get a player that can really ease any sense that there might be a drop-off if Saka's injured or needs to be rested, if you could get a player that could then also fill in as a right-back where needed, especially in the games where you expect to dominate, I can imagine Ben White playing at centre-back and Frimpong overlapping beyond Saka. That's one I really, really like. I know it's a bit left field, it's a bit esoteric, and a lot of people will say the issue in this Arsenal team is goals. But I just think you can't quite solve that issue right now. But you can just add a little bit of pace. And I think in the closing months of the season against heavy legs, I think we'd all be surprised how much value that has.
Right. Now,
have I talked you around?
No.
No, of course
No.
not.
I look at this Arsenal team right now and what's going to prove potentially to make the difference in the second half of the season. And I cannot, and I'm sure he's a very good player. I haven't seen much of him, I have to admit. But I just don't look at that side of the pitch as being the thing that is going to potentially push Arsenal on to win the title. I think you've got to look at in midfield what's going on there. You've got to potentially look up front, maybe a direct replacement stroke competition for Xhaka. I'm not sure Frimpong is that in my very limited experience of him. But obviously each to their own and to their own opinion. So I will gladly accept your choice. How long has he been at Leverkusen? He's only been there about a year, hasn't he? He was at Celtic, wasn't he?
A year and a bit. Yeah, he was at Celtic. And I think a lot of teams have tried to use him as a right back and concluded that he doesn't have the defensive quality. So in theory, with Xabi Alonso, he's a sort of right midfielder, but he's not. Like, they'll defend in the back four quite often, and he's just a right winger. Very good at getting isolated against his defenders. He's more likely to go down the outside. But again, that gives you a sort of an alternative way of approaching things to Saka. I mean, the thing is, we talk about realistic, and my view there is sort of, if you talk very nicely to Stan and Josh Kroenke, you could probably put together a package that Bayer Leverkusen would sort of go, yeah, go on then. That's a good return. And, you know, they are a club that accept that sometimes players have to get sold. They wouldn't be cheap, but we're not talking £100 million for Ivan Toney money. Yeah. I'm not putting a price on it because that will get aggregated. So we're going to steer clear of that.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, fair play. That's your choice. Not who I'd go for, I have to say, but that is your choice. Interesting to see what our listeners and viewers have to say about that. Right, I'm going to go with mine now, and I have to say that I have two. So I'm kind of cheating, but I'm cheating for a reason, and that will become clear. So my choice, and I've decided it's midfield that Arsenal need to bolster over the second half of the season. Well, not just second half of the season, but just going forward. I think it's very obvious what's going on with Thomas Partey. I think at the moment it's beginning to feel like that is probably the area they're going to target in January. If they're going to target any area, it might well be that, given what's going on with Thomas Partey. And so I've come up with two, and there's a reason I've come up with two. So my choices are these two. I'm staying Premier League. I'm going back on the success.
I love the first one.
I'm going back with the success that Arsenal had last January with their two signings coming in, hitting the ground running in terms of Leandro Trossard and Jorginho, who's still playing very key roles now. So Lucas Paqueta is my first choice. I think he fits exactly what Arsenal needs. The Kai Havertz thing just hasn't worked, and I'm not totally ready to write it off yet, but I'm seeing no signs that it's going to work. And Arsenal have effectively been carrying a player when he's been playing for large chunks of it. He's been all right. He's done all right, but that's about it. They need more. I think if they're going to keep the pace with Manchester City, they need more. And I think Paqueta will come in and could play that role absolutely superbly. But there's obviously this betting scandal or investigation hanging over him, which, you know, Manchester City were going to sign him in the summer. That looked like it was about to happen. Then suddenly this investigation emerged and City backed off and didn't do the deal. And so I imagine if that is still ongoing, which I believe it is, that could potentially stop Arsenal. I'm not sure West Ham would be very keen to sell Paqueta to Arsenal on the back of just selling Declan Rice to Arsenal anyway, but I don't care.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, I don't think they'd be very keen on that. I think the fans would actually literally riot. But, you know, West Ham showed in the summer that they were potentially willing to let Paqueta go, and Paqueta was very clearly up for going as well. So, you know, why would they say yes to Manchester City and then no to Arsenal? So there is the option of that potentially there. But if it didn't happen, if it was impossible, then I'd be switching my attentions to potentially West London and bringing in a player who I think is just a fabulous footballer. I thought he was brilliant when he played against Arsenal early in the season. Of course, scored the crucial equaliser in that goal. Was going to go to Bayern Munich, which says, you know, a lot about how he's viewed by the world's best teams. Has just signed a new contract, obviously, in João Paulinho I'm talking about. but I don't think that necessarily ties him to the cottage for good. And I think, again, he comes in and would just give Mikel Arteta real strong options in an area where it's just a midfield where I just fear if something happened to Declan Rice, I just think that would, right now, I think that would be the end of Arsenal's title hopes this season. If Rice was to be out for 6 weeks or 2 months for something, which hopefully he won't be, but if he was, I'd just be really, really worried. And I think we saw a glimpse of what that midfield could end up looking like in the League Cup game at West Ham when Arsenal had just lost that battle very, very badly. And so, yeah, I think that would be the area. If I'm looking at anyone in January or a position in January, it would be midfield, whether that be left 8 or another option at 6 that could allow Declan Rice to play left 8 regularly, more regularly, and not have to fill in. So yeah, Paqueta would be my absolute first choice, just because I think he'd be perfect for that position. And then Paulinho would be my second if Paqueta was unable to happen.
I mean, very different players, you have to say.
Yeah, I know, but I think they are. But I think also that just gives Arsenal the options to in midfield. It's like you could bring in Paulinho, you could play him as the sort of more deep line. Although I still look at Paulinho when I've watched him. He is pretty. I see him playing box to box a lot of the time and getting forward and scoring goals. He scored a wonderful goal the other day. Was it Brighton? He scored the equaliser.
Yeah.
Was that was Paulinho, wasn't it? Yeah. And so I think he does offer that. But again, he could just play as the holder in place of Thomas Partey. He's got the ability to pass the ball like Thomas Partey has, and that would allow Declan Rice to play more often than not as the 8 if needs be, to fill in for Kai Havertz if Kai continues to do pretty much nothing every week. So
yeah. Paulinho, I mean, I'm just not feeling it. It just doesn't excite me. But you're right; he's a very, very good player, and you would never then have to worry about the defense being protected. I do wonder if his sort of ball progressing is good enough. I mean, Paqueta, though, yeah, I'd walk over broken glass to get him to the Emirates. He is wonderful. He's a joy. I mean, interestingly as well, if you see where West Ham have used him on occasion, you could like kind of say he's an alternative for Saka as well, and that would be a way of, if Saka's injured, you could get Havertz in the team if you needed to. I mean, equally, it would be sort of the death knell on Kai Havertz, and Arsenal, he just would never be the left 8, really, would he? That would be Paqueta's job. If the chance ever came along at some stage, with that, you have to have almost a similar view to what you had with Aaron Ramsdale or Granit Xhaka, of sort of like, well, sorry, Kai, we think we can do better. God, because the thing is, Arsenal, there's so many brilliant, talented players in that team. This is going to sound quite a harsh criticism, but sometimes it's. I mean, Odegaard does it on occasion, doesn't he? He gives you some sort of ludicrous flick or pass, but I think he's a little too sensible. Like, he obviously is like obeying his manager's instructions and he's dictating tempo and rhythm. Like Lucas Paqueta every once in a while will just go full futsal on you. Like, it'll be like you're watching someone playing in FIFA Street. He's wonderful at doing all that. And the Emirates would fall in love in an instant, wouldn't it? I mean, much like they sort of did. I'm thinking of his debut already in an Arsenal shirt, and it's like the Dani Ceballos one. Yes, he would be brilliant. He would be expensive, no doubt. And like you say, I don't think there's a lot of goodwill between West Ham and Arsenal, but I think they'd be mad not to try if the opportunity emerged. And I'll chuck in 10 quid as well. Help out.
Yeah, I will chuck in 20. See if we can get the deal done.
That's like YouTube money for you, isn't it?
We have to say that this is just us spitballing here, and this isn't anything serious. This is just us. This is we're just imagining and stuff before this ends up
going to be furious when Arsenal gets someone from Chelsea on loan, and that's it.
Yeah. But I have been asking our viewers for their suggestions, and they've been sending them in by the bucket load.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot to go through here, and that's not even anywhere close to the amount that was actually sent in. So if I didn't pick yours, apologies, but we would just be here forever going through them. So there are a lot. So let me see here. Hold on. Okay, these are small because I needed to fit them in. So I've actually got them here slightly bigger, so I can actually read them better. James, pronounce the Napoli
Kvicha
winger.
Kvaratskhelia.
I honestly, I tried to pronounce the word mechanicanism earlier on my show. How do you say that word?
Mechanicanisms. What?
Well,
I don't know what that word is.
I can't even.
Automatisms.
Is it even a word? Is that why I couldn't say it? Someone had sent it in, and I was trying to mechanisms.
Is this
Mechanisms,
mechanisms?
isn't it?
Okay, yeah, that one.
God, honestly, I stumbled over it so much.
You spend too much time talking into a microphone.
I know. I was at the gym earlier before recording this, and I was still running through my head. I was like, "How do you say that word?" I still couldn't put it out. Okay, so what was it? The Napoli winger. What's the correct?
Kvicha Kvaratskhelia.
Okay, so yeah, James here has gone for him,
Yeah.
just because of the look in his eyes, and also the football he plays. Yeah, he's a mentality monster at times, a one-man wrecking crew. I don't think he's not quite hit the heights this season he did last season, has he? But it was very hard. I
Sort of
suppose
Napoli as a whole, yeah.
Napoli as a whole, yeah, very hard to. But yeah, hell of a talent. So that's who James has gone for. I've got a Paulinia shout here from Guna Philosopher, Zubamendi from Twatbokoyuma. Sorry if that's totally wrong. We've got Miroslav down there who says, "Get Granit Xhaka back." Non-realistic though. I'll tell you what, honestly, and we're going to talk about Granit Xhaka later on. I genuinely would, if if it was possible, Granit Xhaka. I think Arsenal win the title if everyone stays fit and Granit Xhaka's in this team. I think Arsenal win the title if Xhaka's still at Arsenal. But
the irony of it all.
I know,
if he goes and wins
unbelievable.
the title this season.
But Miroslav says Quinton Timber, and there's others who have sent in a shout for the other Timber brother. Fast, technical, nowhere near his peak, relatively cheap. Brothers United fits the criteria and FFP. Let's go for another one here. If B, I don't even know what that is. If Biffy says has to be a midfielder, left 8 remains a whole, even with a fully fit squad. Obvious ones would be Zubamendi, Douglas Luiz. I don't think either of those are realistic in January. My choice would be Zielinski, 29-year-old, out of contract in the summer, both footed, has a goal in him, reminds me of signing Jorginho and Trossard last January. Then you get your number one midfielder in the summer. We've got another from Quentin Timber here. That's Inked Skin with Sins. And John Fleming, which I don't know if you know John 00 Fleming, James. I was actually listening to him in the gym. Classic, proper old school trance, psytrance, deep prog DJ. Brilliant. If you go to Glastonbury all the time, get down to the Glade stage at Glastonbury.
Oh, well.
See John 00 Fleming at his very best.
You might like my cardigan.
But I don't think this is the John Fleming. But it might be. You never know if it is. Hello, John. I've danced to you many a times on dance floors across London. I'm with you in the left 8 position, but who I don't know. Interest still bubbles around from Luiz. Not sure he's a left 8 though. He said, as a wild and not very likely as it is, I ask you both. I presume this is me and you. Would you entertain the idea of a Tony Nketiah swap deal in January, say 30 to 35 million plus in Nketiah? Tony wouldn't be my first choice for a striker long term. But if such a deal could be made, it feels like it could be a win. So there are others as well, which we'll go through. But in those first 2 slides, I mean, is there any names there that you've sort of looked at? I mean, Quinton Timber, do you know much about the other Timber brother? Zubamendi at Sociedad, obviously, certainly generating a lot of headlines at the moment. Barcelona very keen. Bayern Munich supposed to be keen on him as well. Arsenal long-term admirers.
Yeah, I only have seen him in the Champions League, but I've seen a lot of him in the Champions League because Sociedad is such a good watch. I mean, he feels like a really good fit as a 6 with Rice as an 8. It's more of a tempo setting 6, and maybe someone that could come through the lines and do that Partey stuff. Like you say, I think Arsenal have watched him before. I mean, we probably should acknowledge Douglas Luiz because he's clearly a target on Arsenal's radar. I just
very hard to do that. He just signed a new contract, and he's playing so well and so much for Unai, and obviously Unai's getting a lot out of him. Villa very ambitious, not skint. I mean, that's a really difficult deal to do, isn't it?
That's always what I've thought. To be honest, it's why I've sort of steered clear of putting anything down in an article about Douglas Luiz, because kind of until I get any sense that it's easy to do or it's theoretically doable, like that's just Villa are going to make it so hard, and rightly so. If they're challenging for Champions League football for the first time in a generation, if this is the sort of, if that's the level they're aspiring to, they would be mad to sell Douglas Luiz. And I don't think that Douglas Luiz would expect to be allowed to go in January. I think
No.
that would be one that you might see revived in the summer, because that's a huge money investment. Luiz is probably then the left 8 or rotating with Rice, so you need more of a sample size on Havertz. It's one I find a little hard to see happening, but obviously it's one that Arsenal are exploring whether they can make happen.
Well, you think how hard Villa fought to keep him when he had less than a year left on his contract,
Yeah,
and wasn't a regular under Steven Gerrard at that time. He wasn't playing week in, week out under Gerrard.
Arsenal was so surprised, weren't they? They were like, it's just when we're having this dialogue with Villa, there's no figure coming back.
No,
nothing.
Arsenal would. It just became very, very aware on that deadline day that they weren't budging. They were not. No matter, I think Arsenal raised their bid 3 times in less than 24 hours, and each time it was just like it's not happening. It's not happening, and it did surprise Arsenal. And in the end, they pulled the plug because they knew it just wasn't going to happen. I do wonder when we say it's going to be a very hard deal to do. I wonder if we have to move away from that a little bit now with Arsenal. They've just signed Declan Rice from West Ham, beaten Manchester City, and spent more than £100 million to do it. That was a very hard deal to do.
Yeah,
that at times looked like it was going to be an impossible deal to do, but they did it. Have we kind of moved on to that stage now where maybe deals that we look at as potentially being very hard to do doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, because that's what Arsenal is that's the route or that they're working in now.
I think the way to view that for me would be that there are only a handful of players, a handful of clubs that are beyond Arsenal's reach in the summer. So in the summer, let's say that Villa don't qualify for the Champions League, which is the likeliest scenario. In the summer, they may well have a very different view on Douglas Luiz and his future. And I think, if Arsenal's number one target at this time last year for central midfield was Declan Rice. But they didn't even, I believe they might have raised the possibility of signing him with West Ham once.
I think
Correct me if I'm wrong.
It was made very, very clear that it just literally wasn't going to happen.
It was never going to happen. And, West Ham, as they were making that clear, knew it will happen with some team in the summer. Now, I don't know what Villa's view is on Douglas Luiz in the summer. I have no idea. But I'm we can clearly have a degree of confidence in what their view on him is right now, given the shape of their season. I don't think there are many players out of Arsenal's reach in the summer. January it's a bit harder. Same thing with Caicedo.
Yeah, it's. I think you're right. I do think you're right. I think it would be a very hard one. Right, let's move on to some of the others.
Oh, I like the Toney and Nketiah thing, by the way. That's a way of convincing me to do the Toney deal.
Yeah. What, Nketiah, it was John, wasn't it, down there? He said, as a Wilder, would you take 35 million? Would you do that? Would you do that deal then, Toney? And so give them Nketiah and 35 million for Toney in January?
Yeah, about that. I'd try and haggle it down a bit, because I think they're getting a lot of years of Eddie Nketiah compared to how many years Arsenal might get of Ivan Toney. But that's the sort of structure where I look at it as, because I think we maybe underestimate even someone like Eddie Nketiah, or we underestimate how hard it will be to sell a price that Arsenal really like for Nketiah. So if you can potentially use him as ballast in a deal like that, and we know how hard swap deals are. I can't see it ever happening. No. How many swap deals can you think of? And it's always like player for player. But that sort of construction, because I think he's getting pushed out anyway, isn't he?
Yeah, I think Eddie's worth a lot of money. I have to say, I do think Eddie's worth a lot of money in today's market. His age, contract now in England, now sort of in the England reckoning anyway. I think he's worth a lot. But right, let's go over to some more. We've got another from Paulinho there at the top. Youssouf Fofana at Monaco. Now, that's a name that quite a few people have thrown at me. In midfield, Matt says Toney, hungry Premier League goal scorer of a point to prove, backs up our attacking threat. Yes, he's older, but sometimes you need to buy for the now. And then the real Nostradamus says, if Rice takes the 8, I'd go for Douglas Luiz. He also mentions Mbeumo and Pedro Neto. Now, Neto is a player I'd absolutely love at Arsenal. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
big fan of Pedro Neto. I have to say, injured at the moment, which is a bit of a shame. Hopefully, he stays injured until after the Arsenal game. But yeah, really good player. I would absolutely love to sign Pedro Neto. So that's a good shout for me. So what about you? Thinking, actually, let me move on to the next one, and then we'll go back to those. Dusan Vlahovic, we have a shout for. Dusan Vlahovic, Douglas Luiz, again mentioned there. Got Onana from Everton, Joshua Kimmich. Surely I can't see that one. That one happening.
Yeah, I'd love that one.
Yeah, I can't see that one happening. No, and Santiago Jimenez, who at final, isn't he? Yeah, I had a few messages about him. So obviously having a very good season in front of goal at the moment. So what about those couple of pages? Anyone there who sort of jumps out at you?
I know you and I are already dreading the idea of Dusan Vlahovic's name even being mentioned in conjunction with Arsenal again. And I would love to know what Edu thought of how that whole transfer saga played out. It really felt there like the Vlahovic camp were using fairly tentative sort of conversational interest from Arsenal to get Vlahovic a move to Juventus ahead of schedule. And I believe now he's struggling to establish himself as a regular starter for Juventus. So a loan with an obligation to buy for him, no, thank you. He takes a very good penalty. And Buemo is one I would really like as a. He's a bit. If you didn't have Leandro Trossard in the squad, I know they are very different players, but it's that sort of versatile, can play across the front line, Premier League experience, ticks all those boxes. So if you felt you needed another forward and maybe didn't expect to do big business in the summer in that position, which I think we expect Arsenal to do, you would be like, Buemo, let's take a look at that one. I really like him. The thing is, maybe he doesn't offer you an entirely different option to Gabriel Jesus. If you played him at centre forward, I think their great qualities are their technique, burst, their scrappiness. Like, I don't want to say that like Jesus and Buemo lack strength, but it's not the sort of Tony or Calvert-Lewin like will dominate in the air strength, which I think is what Arsenal are missing at centre forward. So I'm going to ask you about Gimenez. How much have you watched of him?
Not much. I've seen bits and pieces because people keep sending it to me, saying, "What do you think of him?" And obviously having a very good season for final. But I know it's a bit disrespectful to the Eredivisie, but I'm always a bit suspect. I've got it's just like Kesman vibes for any sort of striker who comes over, prolific striker who comes over from
Alfonso
Holland.
Alves.
That I just worry about. Obviously, Timber's come over from Holland and looks absolutely mustard. So that was maybe I'm wrong in that, and Timber has shown me wrong. But it's more the striker coming over from Holland. It's I don't know. Obviously, Ruud van Nistelrooy did it and did it very, very well. So yeah, I think I maybe need to see him a little bit more in Europe doing it. I think he's done all right in Europe. He's got a couple of Champions League goals, hasn't he?
He's playing for a very good final team.
Yeah,
I think it'll look right up there.
They look quite good from what I've seen from the bits and pieces I've seen. Good attacking team, aren't they? And he seems to be doing well. I'm sure he's going to get a big move fairly soon. Fofana's an interesting one. A lot of people have talked about Fofana. Have you seen much of him at Monaco?
I saw the Emirates Cup game. Was that was Fofana we're thinking of, right, from the Emirates Cup game?
I was on holiday in the Emirates Cup, so I wasn't there. I was in Portugal, so I didn't even see it.
I believe Fofana was the player at the Emirates Cup that was just like jaw on the floor, sensational, running the midfield in a very good game. So that's pretty much the extent of my use of Fofana knowledge. But like, it is one of those games where you're like, who is he? I want him.
Yeah. He's a very popular choice. I reckon
Mm.
a good sort of 6 or 7 people have sent his name in to me. So he seems like a popular choice that people would like. I've got one more page to go through. Now, Jonathan David, a player that we both know and have sort of kept our eye on over the recent years, doing very good things in France, Canada, international. A couple other sort of names mentioned there from Moss Sports World. Who have we got there? Ollie Watkins. Someone has had a shout for Ollie Watkins again. That sort of falls into the Douglas Luiz category of just feeling like an impossible one to do almost. Rafinha, again, a player I really like. who I was really into Arsenal signing when they tried, and initially tried for him before he ended up going to Barcelona. And is it Benacer? Is that how you pronounce it, right? Obviously,
Benacer. Yeah, bring him
ex-Arsenal,
home.
Ex-Arsenal, bring him back to the club.
Did he
good
play
age
in the Sheffield Wednesday game?
I don't know.
I
Is he
think
one
he
of the
did.
players? Did he ever play? Did he actually make? Let me right. I'm gonna search.
I'll keep talking about my view on. I think everyone that played in that Sheffield Wednesday game should be obliged to come back to Arsenal at some stage and make amends if they have. So Alex Iwobi, I feel like you've made amends.
He
Given
made his
what we,
senior Arsenal debut in the League Cup away to Sheffield Wednesday. He did play in that game.
so look, Ismail, you owe Arsenal because that was one of the. It was sort of one of the like an embarrassing moment, but you're like best laugh it off. If you're Arsene Wenger, who I believe did end the game just laughing at how ridiculous his team was playing. So yeah, Benacer owes Arsenal a duty. So if he wants to come back and make amends, be my guest.
He replaced Walcott after 19 minutes, and Walcott had just come on to replace Oxlade-Chamberlain, who had already got injured in that first 19 minutes. What an absolute car crash of a game that was. That was really, really low. That was a real low point. Yeah, Sheffield Wednesday in the League Cup. I think we're all going to be scarred by that one for a long, long time. So yeah, lots of good shouts there. I think so. Thank you very much for everyone. Have you changed your mind at all seeing these sent in, or are you still sticking with your right back choice?
No, I want Lucas Paqueta. As much as it pains me to agree with you, I would really. I mean, we know it's never going to happen. Certainly not in January, but give it. I mean, what is the point if you're Josh and Stan Kroenke of having all that money?
Well, exactly. Just sell a bit of the ranch off in Texas. Give it away. Get some good real estate money and bring in Lucas Paqueta and just annoy the hell out of the West Ham fans even more, who are still smarting from Declan Rice at the weekend. So yeah, thank you very much for everyone for sending all your comments. Again, if I didn't get yours up on the screen, apologies. There was just so many, and so many of them are kind of the same player as well. It had just been repeating ourselves over and over again. So thank you very much for engaging in that. I do appreciate it. Right, let's move on to your exploits at the weekend. Your trip to Germany to watch Bayer Leverkusen, who ended up smashing Union Berlin 4-0. Granit Xhaka front and centre of all of that. You spoke to Granit, didn't you? You spoke to Xabi Alonso. I've got a quote here from what Granit said to you about sort of leaving Arsenal and why he went. He said, a lot of people ask me, why are you going to Germany? It's a step back. For me, it's not a step back, it's a step forward. I think the last 4 months have been very, very good for us as a team and for myself. Everything was exactly what I wanted here. I'll never forget the time I was at Arsenal, 7 years. It was a long time of ups and downs, good and bad things. I had a feeling that I needed a new challenge. I'm so happy to be here because the challenge you're seeing here was in my mind. It's an amazing club, big history. Let's make bigger history if we can. Those are the words of Granit Xhaka. Was it good to see the big man again, James?
Well, I timed it very well, I must say, because he was sensational. And you know what? He was sensational in exactly the way we knew Granit Xhaka always could be, given the right moment. Double pivot, ball comes to Granit Xhaka. Granit Xhaka moves it on. I just got there in the stats: 145 of 151 passes completed.
151 passes in that game. 151.
Well, I have to say, Union Berlin were atrocious. They've just sort of parted way reluctantly with the man who got them to the Bundesliga, I believe, and got them to the Champions League final. And when someone's done that much for a club, and they kind of get the heave-ho mid-season, they must be playing badly. And they were dreadful. But Xhaka was sort of excellent as the tempo setter. What Arteta was for Arsenal. What Xabi Alonso was, maybe not to quite as high a level. And I got to see Xabi Alonso train a few days later. God, what a player. He looked totally at ease in his role. He is settled there almost immediately as a veteran, a leader on the pitch, a leader in the dressing room. And one of the things Alonso said to me when I asked him, what's it like and how important is it having someone like Xhaka in the setup? He is the person that reflects Alonso's message into the dressing room. And we have to say, Leverkusen, who kind of rallied at the end of last season to finish sixth, they're now top of the Bundesliga, dropped just 2 points in drawing to Bayern Munich. a really special team. It's quite a similar story to Arsenal. Young Basque coach, attacking, effervescent football led by youngsters, but with an experienced Swiss midfielder. I feel like Granit Xhaka knows exactly what he's going through right now. No surprise he's not getting carried away, but he has really established himself as crucial to a top European team once more.
Yeah, I was over in Germany for that Frankfurt book fair I was at, and I was talking to a couple of the big sort of media sports personalities over there. One of them from DAZN, who was interviewing me on the stage actually, and he was telling me a lot about Leverkusen and how just captivating they've been this season. This sort of football that they're playing, what Alonso's drilled into them. He's talking about the influence that Granit's had, obviously, on it, and it does feel from the outside. I mean, I've not seen much of it at all, but it has all the hallmarks of Arsenal last season. It seems like a very similar.
It really
story.
feels like it.
Yeah,
it feels that there's that moment of just everything's a little bit ahead of schedule and it's fun, and almost the challenge is to keep, for a young coach like Xabi Alonso, it's to keep that energy, from boiling over, harness it and run with it, especially in the knowledge that kind of the team you have behind you is just this hyper team that's got better because it's added a world-class centre. I mean, the parallels are actually now the more I talk through them, the parallels are baffling. I mean, literally right the way down to the perennial champions have just added an elite level centre forward, and are sort of right in the hunt, and all the numbers are looking like, oof, yeah, Bayern will eventually steamroller them. But so I wonder how valuable, equally for that reason, Xhaka will be down the stretch, because I know kind of off the back of this game, there was an awful lot of chat on Arsenal Twitter about bringing him back. And I really think there are so many questions about him as a footballer, and there have been questions about his attitude, but you and I both know the guy behind the scenes in the dressing room, there's a reason why so many coaches just love him.
I honestly think Arsenal win the title with Xhaka in the team this season. If Xhaka's playing there, and it's I know, and it's all hypothetical, of course, we'll never know, but I genuinely think if everyone stayed fit, if you had Rice playing as a six, you had everyone fit to be able to sort of interchange players and rest everyone, but you had Granit. I just look at that left 8 role, and we saw what he did last season. How important was that wasn't going to fall off this season. He was going to
clearly
replicate
not
that this season. He was definitely going to replicate. We see what he's doing with Leverkusen now. Even he's playing slightly deeper now, isn't he? He's not playing.
He's a true six. Yeah,
I saw that the heat map that you'd put in your piece. And by the way, if you want to read James's piece, it's really good. It's a big sort of wide ranging piece on Leverkusen. The link's in the description below. He's also put it out on his social media. And I was looking at the heat maps, and you could noticeably see, obviously, he was playing far more advanced for Arsenal than he is now for Leverkusen. But had he still been here this season and playing in that role, his performances wouldn't have dropped off. His goal outputs, his goal involvements, I don't see why they would have dropped off at all. And I just think he would have been a different. I think Arsenal would win the title. I genuinely do. And it seems so mad to be pining over Granit Xhaka when you consider where it was sort of 4 or 5 years ago. But I think he was that important. And the fall off because of what's gone on with Havertz and the fact he hasn't yet. I'm not writing him off completely yet, but the fact he hasn't even shown signs of being able to, fill the void left by Xhaka at all. It's just. That's a really big worry. And had Xhaka been there, then you wouldn't have had that worry. So yeah, I do think it's he's been a huge loss.
It would be. I mean, the joyous scenario, and let's be honest, he says there it's a step forward, not a step back, or words to that effect. And I think, he would never say it, but he kind of went into the end of last season and the start of the summer knowing that, whether it was through Rice arriving and Rice and Partey or however it might have set up, he was probably not looking at being a 35 game a season starter in the Premier League. And he's gone to a club where he is. So no judgment there. But I mean, the ideal scenario for Arsenal, at least in my view, is that Xhaka had stayed around because he is such a professional on the training ground, but also kind of to show Havertz the ropes, to set the standards, to make Havertz come in and take that place, wrench that place out of Granit Xhaka's hands. And I do agree with you. I mean, I think Arsenal would be a much better team with Granit Xhaka in there. And by God, that feels strange to say, doesn't it? Because we've almost since the day he arrived, we were sort of talking about who else they might have had instead. I just missed that his qualities are really missed. That doesn't mean that maybe Arsenal were wrong to do the things they did, given the knowledge they had. But yeah, it'd be funny. I'd really, really, really hope these two teams run into each other in the Champions League next season. It would be joyous to see him back.
I had a question about Granit on one of my shows I did earlier this week. Someone was asking, do you think it was a mistake for Mikel to let him go? And so I don't really put it down as a mistake because Granit clearly wanted to go and Mikel would convince Granit to stay for about 3 successive seasons, pretty much. And it's like, you can't keep doing that. At some point, you're just going to have to say, okay, you can go this time. And I think given Granit's age and his contract and the money that was eventually on the table from Leverkusen, it was a good deal to do for the club. So I don't really put it down as a mistake, but yeah, I really do wish, like you, they'd managed to sort of talk him round to stay in one more year, because I just think the difference he would have made this season would have just made me feel a hell of a lot more confident in terms of what Arsenal were going to go on to achieve. But it's in the past, it's gone. It's a really good piece, James. Well done. And to everyone who wants to read it, then head down to the description. The link is there. Right. I wanted to talk to you because I haven't spoke to you about this yet. Have you seen?
Yeah, I have seen. I've seen the quotes, not the pod.
Yeah, Sophie and Kevin sat down with it's Nick, isn't it, Nick? On Monday night, and then Monday Madness show on the Highbury Squad. And obviously, I've discussed this on my shows this week, but I just wanted to ask your thoughts on it. It was really. I was driving earlier today on the way back from dropping my kids off, and no, it was on my way back from the gym actually. Sorry, and Simon Jordan and Jim White and Danny Murphy were on TalkSport, and they were debating this. And Simon Jordan and Danny Murphy were, as you would expect, sort of belittling Aaron, I would say, for the fact that his dad has gone on and said all this stuff, and saying, just get on with it. He's a professional footballer. Why is his daddy coming on and doing that stuff? Which is a little bit harsh, but I mean, there is certainly a sense of that. When I saw it and read the quotes and then watched the show, it was like, what? Because Aaron must have known. I do not believe for a second that his dad did this without Aaron knowing that this was going to happen. Those two are very, very close, and there's no way that his dad would do this without Aaron's knowledge that it was going to happen. So Aaron would have been aware that this was going to come. And I mean, the more I think about it, the more I just think this has got to be some sort of maneuver, surely, ahead of the January transfer window. The timing of it feels really interesting. It's 6 weeks before the window opens. Gareth Southgate has just warned Aaron very publicly that if he doesn't start playing regular minutes, his place in the Euro squad could potentially be in jeopardy. And then this comes out. It just feels like a little bit of a maneuver because it's not going to go down well at Arsenal, is it? You can't.
No.
Mikel will not be sitting there at Colney this week and being like, "Oh, that's fine." It's surely not as much as I kind of, I've got nothing against what Nick Ramsdale said in it at all, and so it's not that. It's just the fact that, did you really need to do it? Did this really need to happen?
Not least because the story was quietening down a bit. I mean, you and I, who are talking about Arsenal every week at most games, there's a level where kind of people at our level in the media profession just we can't be doing with. There's nothing new to say. The debate is over, and we wouldn't have thought coming into this pod that we'd have been talking about Aaron Ramsdale in any sense other than by the way, he's got to start against Brentford after the international break. That's interesting. Like you, I don't believe at all that this happened without Ramsdale's knowledge, and I think we would know by now. This came out on Monday. We're recording on Wednesday. I think we would know by now if it had happened without his blessing. Yeah, it just feels like it doesn't help. Like it's going to ratchet up the tension around this situation in January. And the best kind of way that Ramsdale could have made his point is just to wait a fortnight and come in that Brentford game. And I know it can sometimes be hard coming in for one game at Arsenal, because if you pick the wrong game, if Arsenal play really well against Brentford, Aaron Ramsdale might have nothing to do and might not be able to make his point. But that's how you show Mikel Arteta you're wrong, because whilst we know that David Raya is his preferred option, I think we would probably all agree, whether you rate Raya as a start, whatever you rate it as, that it hasn't been so flawless that Ramsdale can't make a case. That he can't make a case in the Brentford game, that he can't make a case in the training ground. But we know for a fact the one way Mikel Arteta will not like Ramsdale making a case is in this very public forum, where we're now all talking about it. It's almost, especially in the international break, it fills this void, because God, we've got nothing to talk about where England are concerned. And I mean, I think that we should always say it's great that people will talk with the candor that Nick did. And he's obviously saying things we kind of suspected, but it's important that we kind of know footballers as people and understand, when Ramsdale takes the pitch, we understand that he's been going through 2 really tough months for himself as a professional. But I do think there are reasons why you keep this in-house.
Yeah, I look at it and I just wonder, where is any sort of benefit in this being aired publicly? We all know that's what they'll be feeling behind the scenes. And, everyone all knows that. Of course, he's not going to be happy. Of course, he's going to be upset about the way it's happened. But I'm not sure you need to come out and say that. Especially, I'm not sure your dad needs to come out and say that either. I mean, maybe Ramsdale in a position when he's in England at a press conference, he can say it because it's him and it's his words. But it's not a great look, I don't think, really, as much as, I can't imagine that has gone down very well at Colney, and it almost adds more pressure, I think, on Ramsdale for that Brentford game. He was already going to be under quite a bit of pressure, but he showed when he came in against Brentford, coincidentally in the League Cup, that he handled that pressure really, really well last time, produced a really good performance. But now, the press conference at Colney before that Brentford game is going to be about this. It's definitely going to be about this, because Ramsdale was already going to be a big talking point because he was going to be coming in for this game. And now it's even more. It's all going to be to Mikel. What did you think of his dad's comments? Are you surprised that his dad went publicly? It's gonna ratchet up the pressure even more, I think, on Aaron ahead of that game. And so I just don't see the benefit of it. I just think it was a really strange thing to do. I really do.
100%. Credit to the guys at Highbury Squad for getting the interview.
Brilliant, yeah, for them. Fantastic.
Outstanding. Well done.
Great. It's been really good to see that picked up by everyone and credited by everyone as well. Like, I saw it on Sky Sports. I saw it today. They were talking about TalkSport, and they were all naming the Highbury Squad and giving them the credit they deserve, because it was a really good get for them. And it's a really big story that's done fantastically well. But yeah, from the actual player point of view, it feels like a bit of a strange one, I have to say. And it's got to be. It feels like it's got to be a manoeuvre in terms of ahead of the January transfer window for me, especially on the back of those Gareth Southgate comments. But I just don't see why you'd get rid of Ramsdale in January. Obviously, look, inevitably he's going to go. This plays out one way, and it's that Raya signs in the summer permanently, and Aaron Ramsdale goes, because this isn't going to be something that goes on for 2 seasons. It was always going to be a 1-season thing. But from an Arsenal point of view, you do it in January, suddenly you're weakening your squad in the middle of a Premier League season, in the middle of a Champions League season. And you're going to have to buy another goalkeeper who's clearly not going to be as good as Aaron Ramsdale. And so you're weakening your squad. The only way I see it as being doable is if the funds that you get in January for Ramsdale, which could be fairly significant, you would imagine, are needed to really push the boat out and bring in that big January signing that potentially gets you over the line in the transfer, in the title race. So, I think if that's the case, then maybe it's something they should look to do. But if that's not the case, and it's just a case of letting him go so he can play in January somewhere, you've got to be harsh and say, no, you're sticking around till the summer.
And just, another thought on the January angle is, from Ramsdale's perspective, and kind of everything I was told was, like you, that he's got a sense of which direction this is heading, and that he needs to be thinking about his next step. But, the sort of, I expected Ramsdale to take his time. I don't think he's a player that kind of would want to get trapped in the world of not wet. I don't want to name a team, and I nearly did. A sort of lower mid-table Premier League team where it's very hard to get out if you want to develop in your career. And maybe it's hard to, equally it's hard to play Champions League games and to really show you're one of the best goalkeepers in the world, which, lest we forget, he was ranked one of the 10 best goalkeepers in the world for the Yashin Trophy. And those spots don't come up very often for goalkeepers anyway. They are going to be even harder to find in January. It's clear. I mean, on the basis that Robert Sanchez is doing well enough at Chelsea that I don't see them. It's Chelsea, who knows? But they don't scream like they're going to make a goalkeeper move midway through the season. I genuinely can't see a good landing spot for Ramsdale. It's not like Jordan Pickford's broken his leg, because you would then say, okay, you get it. Ramsdale at the Euros spot is open to him. I don't think Ramsdale could do anything that would convince Gareth Southgate to pick him over Jordan Pickford. So why now? Why not just let this season roll? You may well end up with some silverware or something special and a good exit from Arsenal. But this right now has the feel of someone, a fan favourite who needs to kind of make sure that bridges don't get burned on his behalf. There isn't a rush if you're Aaron Ramsdale. He's a young goalkeeper with his career ahead of him, but this transfer away from Arsenal, if that's what it's to be, it's the one that will define his career. So why do it in January, where it could be that you end up somewhere you don't want to be?
Yeah, and he's only a David Raya injury away from coming back and being an absolute crucial part of this title push for Arsenal. So, I did think it was, I don't know, just ill-advised. I'm sure no one's probably advising Aaron Ramsdale down to do it, but it felt like it's one that certainly suddenly thrusts the spotlight back on the situation again, when maybe just a little bit of calm and quiet was needed in that one. Before we go, I just wanted to have a quick sort of chat on where we are. I mean, it's one hell of a tight Premier League table at the moment. We're at the quarter mark, 12 games gone. So you sort of look at that. City obviously
it's the third mark, isn't it? 4 times 12 is 48. Not that this should be this isn't the maths hour, but it's nearly a third.
It is, of course it is. What am I talking about? Yeah, sorry.
48 game season would kill us.
That's why I failed miserably at school. So United, City sitting top, which is no big surprise, but only 1 point ahead of Liverpool and Arsenal. Spurs imploding down there in fourth now.
Mate.
Villa, obviously, Unai doing the business in fifth, just a point behind Spurs. I said this on my show earlier. The maddest thing of it all is the fact that Manchester United are sitting in sixth and are just 7 points off the top. I don't know how that happened. They've lost 5 games this season, but they're doing that trick where they don't draw. It's either win or defeat, and if you do that, then the defeats aren't that costly, because you're still winning every other game and you're getting 3 points on the board. So it's an interesting one. I mean, how do you sort of see the Premier League at this stage, and sort of with your Arsenal hat on as well, in terms of how Arsenal are shaping up? I mean, I've said it before. I think last year everything went so well early on. The momentum was there so early on that you kind of felt like, can you maintain this? Is it going to fall off? And ultimately it did. This year it feels a lot more sort of building blocks being put in place for a good season. And while that's happening, they're still picking up results and staying in touch, which is a good thing. All at a time, while basically their best forward players have just not played together all season, pretty much.
Yeah, it does feel more like a team that might not even come to life until after Christmas. But by that time, for once, you'll have a fresh-looking Gabriel Jesus. I mean, if he comes back from AFCON and then nothing happens, and there's so many ifs there, and I think you've got to think of it more as a nice to have from a footballing perspective than anything else. But Thomas Partey won't have a huge load of games behind him going into the second half of the season, maybe. So it feels like Arsenal's best games are ahead of them. Whereas, look, even if we'd been doing this, around the Bournemouth game, the Villa game, we'd have been talking about how, the results are coming, but the performances aren't quite what they were. I think it's good to have room to grow into, so long as City don't get miles away, because in the end, you're still looking for a City slip up, aren't you? You're still kind of, if you're winning the title, it's as much about City losing it. I think although the table says that there's only a 1 point gap between second and third and fourth, I think that top 3 is going to pull away. And maybe the most important thing is to make sure that it is a top 3 that pulls away, not a top 2. just to keep grinding out results. Arsenal are quite lucky that the next 3 games are certainly not easy games, but they are favourable. They're games where they could pick up 9 points. And what I like about this team is it has a bit more of the look of a team that isn't going to throw away silly points. I think they learned a lesson very quickly from the Fulham game.
Yeah.
I thought that was reflected in Burnley.
They're very hard to beat, aren't they? That's so obvious this season. I mean, they've conceded 10 goals, same as Liverpool. The one game they have lost, they shouldn't have lost. It should have been 0-0. I don't know if you saw that yesterday. The mic'd up with Howard Webb. I'm not going to talk about it, but it drove me mad. The whole thing is just an absolute joke. But yeah, they're hard to beat, and they're staying in games. And even though we keep saying, they're not being at their fluent best going forward this season, they've only scored 1 less goal than Liverpool. Have been scoring goals left, right, and centre, and all of their forwards have been scoring. And Arsenal have been doing this without their forward line pretty much. And they've still got 26 goals this season. They only conceded 10, only lost 1. I'm quite happy about where Arsenal are at this stage of the season, how things are shaping up. And I do feel there is a lot of room for improvement. But the most positive thing of the lot is that they are where they are, and they are staying in touch, even though they've not been at their very best. And they've already played Manchester City. They've already played Spurs. They've gone away to Chelsea. They've gone away to Newcastle. They've got, played some really difficult games, and yet they're still sitting there right at the top of the table, just 1 point off City. So I think there's a lot to be positive about.
I agree. And it's less the case in the league than the Champions League, but you can always feel pretty good about a league season when you're confident you've got, if not the best defense in the league, and I think it probably is the second best defense in the league. I'm going to ask you one question, though, which is a reverse of order. I'm not going to ask you to pick who you want, because I'm sure you want none of them, but kind of looking at 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, maybe lower, is there any among them that you think could either kind of make it a 4-way race at the top, or is there one that you think will probably end up 4th? I mean, I think it will be Newcastle, even though I think one of the big pluses is that they have so much ground to make up to teams that are picking up like 2.5 points, a game.
I do think that the top 3 are going to be the top 3. I don't know what order they're going to be in, but I'd be surprised if that's not the top 3 come the end of the season. I think Spurs missing Maddison for a long period of time is going to be a big, big blow to them. I think Maddison's in that team and stays fit. The fact they haven't got any European football to worry about.
Van der Ven too, as well.
And Van der Ven,
the man that means they can play that line.
Huge loss, those 2 players at the same time. It was very much a Saliba-Tomiyasu moment for them in the same game, wasn't it? Just a few minutes after each other. And I think that is going to be because we know they're long-term. We're not sure exactly how long, but if that is sort of 2-month thing, if you wait until January for those 2 players to come back, we already saw they looked a completely different team against Wolves. Certainly going forward, they just didn't have that spark without Maddison. So I think they're going to struggle to hold on to 4th. I think they'll be there or thereabouts, but I think they might struggle to maintain it. I do wonder about Chelsea. I think Chelsea are playing well, and I thought they played very well against Arsenal, played very well against City. They're beginning to score goals now. Obviously scored 4 at Spurs, albeit being helped by Spurs being absolutely mad. But they did score 4 at Spurs. They scored 4 against City. I imagine they'll probably spend in January as well because it's Chelsea. I wonder if they might make a bit of a mad charge up the table. I think we're seeing signs that Chelsea are beginning to understand what Poch is doing, and the players are beginning to settle in.
Do they not feel a bit like, though, there's so many passages in your book where you kind of go, Arteta's, there's real signs that something is coming together for Arteta. A thing happens.
Yeah.
And or they just, I think they're a team that feel like they might throw away some silly points, but be hard to beat. I agree. Hard for the best to beat.
There is that soap opera type feel to them still at the moment. I don't think they've lost that yet, where it is ups, downs, bit of a roller coaster type thing. Young team going through a lot of change. So maybe, but I don't know. I'm not sure who gets 4th. I think it's open. Villa are doing great things, and they're just so good at home, Villa. And they're just, I think they've won 15 in a row in all comps or something at home. It's an incredible record at what Unai's doing there, and they've got some really, really good players who are scoring goals. And so, Villa, I don't think you can rule Villa out. I keep going back to it just being Unai, though, and that's not a dig at him, but they, you kind of look, they're struggling away from home. They're brilliant at home, but then they're struggling away from home. Even that league table, you see, they've conceded 17 goals Villa. They've scored 29, but they conceded 17, and it just feels very Unai Arsenal type. Can they maintain this run, or is ultimately a team's going to start running through their midfield and their players who are bombing forward, and they're just going to get left exposed and picked off? So I do have that sort of wonder over Villa at the moment, but they're there. And so you certainly can't rule them out. I mean, I am waffling a bit to your answer, but
no, you've not even mentioned Manchester United, which is that
I don't see it. I don't see United
rubbish.
doing it. I really don't, and so I don't see them getting fourth. But I'm shocked that they're even sixth, to be honest. Really, really shocked. So after all of that, I will probably agree with you that Newcastle look the best placed if they get their players back, because they're missing so many. They've got so many players out. And if they get them back, we know they don't concede many goals. They've got a really strong midfield. They're very hard to beat at home. And if they can get Isaac and Wilson back playing, then they've got goals in their team as well. So I think probably Newcastle are best served to nick that final spot in the. But it might be fifth. It might be top 5 for the Champions League this season, isn't it?
It might well be. Don't ask me about how that coefficient.
No, I don't. I don't know how it works, but it might.
Other than if the English teams do well, there would be a 5th spot.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Look, we're over the hour mark now, so it's time to wrap this up, I think. Thank you very much for the show, James. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching or listening to this. Of course, we will be back next week, and by the time we do get back here, then we will just be a few days away from the Brentford game. What day? Tuesday, Wednesday next week? Oh, I suppose.
Yeah. Whenever suits you.
We'll decide a bit later on, but we will be back next week. So, yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully, James won't be wearing the same cardigan that he's wearing today.
I've got worse.
For the year, he's got worse. He's got worse. Well, that is going to be a sight to behold. So, yeah, thank you, everyone, for watching, for listening, and we will be back next week. See you later.
Bye-bye.